Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to the PA the FI Way podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and thank you so much for joining me for today's show. Before I dive a little bit deeper into the topic of today's episode, I just want to share a few updates. The first is that this is the first opportunity that I have to share with you about a recent trip last month in April down to the Austin area of Texas to see the solar eclipse and to be in the path of totality. A few months ago, I realized that the total solar eclipse was happening soon, and I looked up the path and noticed that the Austin, Texas area was in the path of totality. And we actually have family that live down in that area. It is my mom's sister, so my aunt on my mom's side, and cousins kids as well. And a few months ago, I had asked my mom if she would have interest in going down there for the total eclipse, and she wasn't exactly sure. She was on the fence about it. She believes that she has seen a total eclipse in the past and thought it was kind of interesting, but didn't necessarily remember it to be super memorable. Well, in early March, a month before the eclipse, I had the conversation again with her, and she and my aunt were both on board for us going down there and staying with them, and my aunt would be able to have the day off and watch it together. My cousin was also able to take the day off of work. So we looked at plane tickets, and the cost of plane tickets were so high for the weekend before Monday, April 8th, which was the day of the total eclipse. Of course, we didn't want to pay several $100s for a short flight down to Texas from Minnesota, and I decided to see what it would look like to use Southwest points that I had saved up. And I had enough Southwest points in my account that although the value of the flights were a decent amount of points, I still had enough to cover for the two of us. So I said, hey, Mom, I'll use some of my precious Southwest travel points and cover our tickets that way. Let's go. Let's stay with your sister and family. Then we don't have to search for an expensive hotel because all the hotel rates were really high as well during that time. And they even had a park in their neighborhood where we were able to go and bring lawn chairs to this open grass area, this park, and watch the eclipse. And leading up to the eclipse, we were watching the weather, and it looked like it was going to be 60 to 80% cloud coverage, so we weren't sure how much of it we were going to be able to view. Fortunately, though, the clouds were intermittent enough that we were able to see the eclipse and watch it, and I feel as though the clouds actually added a little bit to some of the video and pictures that we took, and it was just a really fun and cool experience to have. I even ordered t-shirts off of Etsy for the eclipse, so we looked like a bunch of nerds sitting out on lawn chairs, watching the eclipse with our eclipse t-shirts and special eclipse glasses to wear as well. It was a really cool experience where for the few minutes during complete totality, it starts to get darker. It gets to be around the level of dusk, doesn't get fully black, but then you start hearing the nocturnal animals. So you start hearing crickets going and birds or things like that where you hadn't heard them just a few minutes before. So that was really interesting and a unique experience to see as well. So I tell that story to share that this is your sign that if you love to travel hack and start earning a bunch of points, make sure that you are using them for yourself and or your loved ones too, and be persistent about traveling with your aging parents when you can as well. The other update that I have is that I'm looking forward to AAPA coming up a little bit later this month in Houston. And I'm especially looking forward to spending time with some friends from PA school that no longer live in the same state as me. In addition to presenting at AAPA for my first time, I'm going to be presenting a CME presentation about telemedicine. And that's going to be on Sunday, May 19th at 2:45 p.m. So if you are planning on attending AAPA and are interested in learning more about telemedicine, it'd be great to see you there. Additionally, I'll be at different events throughout the conference, so feel free to stop and say hi or message me through Instagram if you plan on being at AAPA as well. For the topic of today's episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that you may have seen or heard about in the news lately, and this is how the FTC has ruled to ban non-competes. So what does this mean? And what does this mean for you? Before we talk further about that, I want to step back a little bit and share a little bit more information about why non-competes are not a great situation to be in. I covered a lot of information about non-competes back on episode 111, which was called What You Need to Know About Non-Compete Agreements. So if you haven't yet taken a listen to that episode, go back and do so when you have the chance. But non-competes are generally very restrictive for the employee that may have one in their contract that they're either reviewing or their contract that they may have already signed. And so here are some of the issues with non-competes. The first is that they really restrict the mobility of the employee. What does this mean? It means that you might literally feel stuck in your specialty or at your clinic or at your hospital or with your surgical group and feel as though you cannot move and switch to a different place or different specialty to a different job overall. It really depends upon how restrictive and the exact details of the clause that you have in your contract. It might say, again, where it might apply to all specialties as a PA, or it might apply to a very large radius in regards to miles. And some non-competes can even include so many miles from all of their locations, not just their one clinic location. So that's really challenging as well to navigate because that really could limit you. They also may be very restrictive for the amount of years that they're applicable for. Another issue with non-competes is that they have the potential to really suppress and lower the wages of the employee. So if you as a PA cannot switch jobs easily, your wages might become stagnant because the employer recognizes and understands that they really have this held over you and that you are limited. So they actually don't feel like they need to pay you more because they don't feel as though you really would leave or have many places that you actually could go to. Another issue with non-competes that probably don't apply too much to healthcare providers, but more so in other fields, would be that they can limit the innovation by the employees too. So it could limit employees by starting new businesses or creating new products, and they might not want to go out and start their own venture because of their concern about the non-compete. Another issue with non-compete is that they could impact the economy on a broader scale and dampen economic growth and productivity. And the final issue that I'll cover today is that non-competes can have legal and financial burdens. So for example, if you have a non-compete and you want to get out of it, paying for legal fees and the time that it takes to challenge the non-compete in court can take a lot of time and take a lot of money, unfortunately. Now, at the same time, that could be applied to the employer as well. They may not want to spend the time or money to actually hold you to the non-compete clause if you do decide to break it. So although the intention of non-competes is to protect the investments in the employee training or protect the business secrets or intellectual property, non-competes generally are viewed as being very restrictive and can actually be harmful to both workers and the economy. Instead, there is something called an NDA, which stands for non-disclosure agreement. And NDAs are a contract where the employee agrees to keep certain information confidential and not share or disclose any secret information. So many places have a non-compete plus an NDA, but going forward, if non-competes truly do get banned, there may just be NDAs in the contracts going forward. There's also, especially in regards to healthcare, there's something called a non-solicitation agreement section of the contract often, and that can imply where if you do decide to move to a different clinic, especially within the same specialty, that you don't try to solicit or take your patients from that current clinic over to your new clinic and advertise and promote that you are transitioning over. So that's a little different than a non-compete. A non-compete would mean that you couldn't even work in that clinic just down the road. So regardless of what specialty you are in, or if you've been practicing as a PA for a long time or a new grad PA, it is critical that you understand what really is in your contract. And that is both when you're about to sign the contract for the first time, but also even refreshing what's in your contract every 6 to 12 months mentally so you truly have a grasp and understand what's in there as well. And back in episode 50, I shared information about things to look for in a contract while you are reviewing it and some red flags to keep an eye out for. So now that we've established about some issues that non-compete clauses can cause, let's talk about something that you may have heard recently in the news about how the FTC has banned non-competes, and many PAs that are in different groups online, I have noticed that they are really excited about this and cheering for this piece of news and are celebrating it already. And yes, this piece of news really does sound great, but I hate to be the person to burst your bubble just a little bit, but just because this news sounds great doesn't mean that it'll actually go into effect. And if it does go into effect, it can take a long time. So that is why I wanted to share about what this means for you as well. So dialing back a little bit, what is the FTC? The FTC stands for the Federal Trade Commission, and it's actually an independent agency of our government. Its mission is to enforce civil or non-criminal U.S. antitrust law and to promote consumer protection. It tries to prevent businesses from practicing in ways that are anti-competitive, deceptive, or unfair to the consumers. It tries to enhance consumer choice so that they are informed as consumers, as well as the public understanding of the competitive process. And they try to do this in ways so that they're not burdening true legitimate business activity. With this recent news headline, it's important to note that the FTC announced a rule banning non-competes, which means that they have voted and want to implement this as a rule. However, it has not actually gone into effect yet to actually enforce banning non-competes. In fact, there have already been lawsuits against this rule. People don't think that they have the right to do this, or they feel like it limits their business practices, don't feel like it's fair. So there is actually legal action that has already started against this rule or this vote to ban non-competes. So we are all probably quite familiar with how long legal processes can be. It might be relatively quick, but it might be a long, dragged out process. Additionally, once it actually goes into effect, I have read that it would take about 120 days for it to actually be implemented from that point. So it's really important that you understand this. And although you may want to leave your position right now, you can't just rip up your contract with a non-compete and say, oh, this isn't applicable to me anymore, and call the clinic next door and go down the street to work for them. Even though you feel like you want to go out in a blaze of glory, you can't quite do that yet. The other thing with the non-competes is that they actually won't apply to every single person if they are banned. So if you are a senior executive in a company who earns more than $151,164 per year and work in policy-making positions, then this would not apply to you. However, this is likely something that's not the case for you, but it could be depending upon the position that you hold, especially if it's one in leadership. The other interesting thing is that this would not apply to nonprofit employers, and many hospitals are nonprofit. However, one of the FTC commissioners said that they can still enforce the non-compete ban on nonprofits if they behave or operate like for-profits. So, for example, some hospitals, they file taxes as nonprofit, but they really operate like very similar to profit-based hospitals and healthcare systems as well. So if you work for one of these organizations or hospitals and you don't exactly know, you should be hearing what your employer actually has to operate as, because they should be checking with their attorneys and looking at their own business practices, following the litigation that's going on through the courts to truly understand. It looks like one of the rules that they're going to implement is that the employers will be required to notify the workers already bound by non-competes that they will not be enforced if that is the case. So they should not be leaving you in the dark. Back in episode 111, where I talked more about non-competes, I also shared about why non-competes are not only harmful for you as a PA and other healthcare providers, but also for patients themselves. So it really would be quite ideal if non-competes were to be a non-issue in the future. But in the meantime, we will have to use the patience that we can muster to see what ends up happening with this rule and with the lawsuits and what plays out over the next several months here. I would love to hear your story about non-competes, what issues you've had in the past with them, what outrageous non-competes you've dealt with over the years. You can go ahead and comment on the post on Instagram or Facebook for this episode today, or send me a DM as well. If you're heading to AAPA, I hope you stop and say hi. Otherwise, I'll see you back here soon. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time.